Some Swedes love the US, and some say that it's a developing country with a Gucci belt. In this video, I'm gonna tell you what Sweden really thinks of America. If you're an American watching this, you might have a lot of different thoughts right now. I don't care what Sweden thinks, for example, or maybe how could anyone think that the US is not the best country in the world? Or maybe you're actually curious what a country like Sweden thinks, which is so similar to the US in so many ways, and yet so different. In that case, I'm here to give you my honest opinion, with a lot of positives, as well as negatives. I'm gonna mix my own thoughts about the US with some standard generalizations of what Swedes typically think. First of all, I have to tell you that there's no single answer to what Sweden thinks of the US. There's a lot of duality in Sweden's opinion of the US. It's almost a bit schizophrenic. But that's also because the US is a slightly schizophrenic country. It's a land of culture and freedom, but it's also a land of oppression and ignorance. It's a rich country filled with technical evolution, but it's also a country filled with backwards thinking and poverty. It's a land of opportunity and also a land of deprivation. So let's get right to it. What are some common thoughts that Swedes have of the land of the free and the home of the brave? The US glorifies violence to a degree that unnerves most Swedes. Might makes right is a doctrine that's thousands of years old. Homer used the phrase "woe to the conquered" in the Iliad, and Titus Livius expressed it as "vae victis." But the phrase has mostly been used by Americans, everyone from Lincoln and Montague to modern-day politicians. And it's present everywhere in American society. Violence is how you protect yourself, how you defend your honor, and how you stop anyone you disagree with. The US also worships its military to an unsettling degree. You're supposed to thank soldiers for their service, and it's universally seen as a positive thing to have served in the military. Sweden isn't a pacifist country. We believe in defending ourselves, but it's seen as a necessary evil and not something we revel in. And guns and weapons in general aren't inherently evil either. Sweden has a lot of hunting rifles, for example. But weapons and violence aren't valued for their own sake in Sweden. Swedes see them as tools to use when all other measures fail. And that's something that differs quite a bit between Sweden and the US. In Sweden, you can drink when you're 18, as well as drive a car, marry, and vote. 18 is basically the time when you become an adult. Swedes find the different ages for different things in the US very strange. You can drive when you're 16, which sounds insane to a Swede. How can you let kids out on the road? But you can't drink until you're 21. By that time, most Swedes have been drinking for 5 years already. You need to be 18 to carry a gun, which actually makes sense. But you can marry when you're 16, at least in some places. Some states have the marriage age at 18, and some at 19, and some at 21. It's extremely confusing for something that's supposed to be one country. The general lack of cohesiveness when it comes to the legal age of various things is something Swedes find very strange. Now let's talk about something Sweden admires about America. Swedes are known to be introverted and reserved, and Americans are the exact opposite. It's not just that they're loud and obnoxious, because they are. It's also that they're truly interested in other people to a higher degree than Swedes. I would bet that most Swedes find Americans surprisingly caring and kind. We have a stereotype about Americans being egocentric, but in all honesty, most of them really think a lot about how they're perceived. It's just that they're loud and take up a lot of space, both literally and metaphorically, so it still causes a culture clash with the quiet Swedes. Another thing that Sweden admires about the US is the science and technology that this country produces. Americans are extremely skilled, and they're in the forefront of most technological revolutions these days. Sweden is doing pretty well for a tiny country in the cold north, but you can't deny the immense impact that the US has on science and technology. The best and the brightest minds come from here, and many innovations as well. And this is a bit of a duality that can be found in the US. It's filled with skilled and smart people, but it's also filled with other types of people. Swedes also find it amazing and very confusing that a country that's so innovative and in the forefront of technology is also so deeply religious. And religion is another thing that Swedes find quite odd about the US. In God We Trust is the official motto of the USA. It can even be found on the $1 bill. The US is a religious country, and you'll find plenty of God-fearing Americans all over the place. And that's something that Americans think is a positive thing. Sweden is officially a Protestant country, and we used to be deeply religious not too long ago. But these days, Sweden is in the top 5 atheist countries in the world, along with Denmark, Norway, Vietnam, and Japan. We love churches in Sweden, but we love them for the architecture and for the symbolic use during weddings and holidays. And there's plenty of religious people in Sweden, along with agnostic and spiritual people in general. But we simply can't understand the intimate connection that Americans have with religion. Churches serve a different function here, and they're more of a social gathering point. And being a Christian is connected with being an upright citizen and having decent morals and values, something that Swedes see as completely separate ideas. I don't really understand it, and I have to say that it sounds very strange to me. And that goes for most Swedes when they hear about religion in the US. Oh, and speaking of things Swedes find strange, let's talk about American patriotism. I like Sweden. I don't mind having a little Swedish flag on midsummer, but come on, the constant flag waving over here is just a little bit ridiculous. It's fine if you think that you're the best country in the world. I don't agree, because I find the concept itself pretty silly, but everyone is free to think what they want. There's always positives and negatives to each country, and no place in the world is perfect. It's all a matter of what fits each individual best. But Americans have taken the concept of patriotism and confirmation bias to a whole different level. For a Swede, it just seems strange to have such a fanatical devotion to your country. How can you ever improve your country if you think that it's already perfect? Isn't it better to acknowledge the good and the bad sides and try to fix the bad things? Swedes are pretty unpatriotic in general, and jingoism isn't part of our vocabulary. And that's not just because we're pretty bad at English. How about we have some sort of cultural exchange? Swedes can teach Americans how to be a bit humble, and Americans can teach Swedes how to actually be proud of what they have. I think we'd both benefit from that. It might not be apparent to people from the outside, but Sweden is in a deeply committed relationship with American culture. We consume everything that the US has to offer: movies, TV shows, music, social trends, everything. And we closely follow in their footsteps. Everything that's popular in the US eventually becomes popular in Sweden too. Everything from cars to rappers to how we speak. And this has been going on since the 1960s, when Sweden became enamored with the American dream. I guess there could be worse places to take inspiration from. I just hope that we don't import more school shootings and stuff like that. Sweden isn't a socialist country, but you can still see traces of its socialist background when comparing to the US. The Swedish welfare system and free healthcare is something Swedes take for granted, so the American system seems a bit odd in comparison. Sweden has the concept of taking care of the least fortunate people first, and the ones who are doing better don't get as much attention. That's becoming less and less true every year. Sweden is becoming more and more unequal, but it's still nothing compared to the US. In America, it seems like there's more focus on lifting up the people who are doing well so they can do even better. I guess that fits with the American dream, but to me it sounds like a lottery. You have a small chance of becoming one of the most fortunate people, but the majority of the population has to suffer instead. To me, it makes sense to make it as good as possible for as many people as possible instead, and that used to be the main idea in Sweden. Now let's talk about nature for a bit. Sweden has lovely lakes and rivers and mountains and forests, and we're proud of our nature. But the US has such an amazing variety when it comes to nature, and so many jaw-dropping sights. I don't think I need to elaborate on this point. Swedes are in awe of the sheer scale and natural beauty that can be found in the US. Swedes have a lot more to say about the US, both positive and negative things. The Pax Americana is something many Swedes are critical of, but in all honesty, we're also thankful for the military capabilities of the US. We're not fond of US politics, but we are big fans of many American companies and culture. The worshipping of athletes in the US is a bit weird. We like sports in Sweden as well, but not to the extreme degree like over here. All in all, I think that most Swedes think that the US is a great place to visit, but we wouldn't want to live here. And that's about it. Those are some things that Swedes really think about the US. I hope you found it interesting. Like and subscribe, but most importantly, have a great day.